Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, and joining me today, behind the image of a Cylon that I've got on the screen, is Alison.
Hey everyone.
We are going to talk about Battlestar Galactica from 2003, the reboot series, and this is something that's been on the docket for a little bit. But this is kind of a first for the TV reviews here, in that this is the first time I think I've reviewed a show that I've seen before. This is a rewatch series, effectively. Although the plan is to be spoiler free, so that people who are watching the show for the first time can watch along and join in. And if we do want to talk about anything about the future of the show that we're kind of noticing as we rewatch this, we'll do that at the end, so everyone can dip out if they've don't want to see the spoilers. So yes, so welcome. This is your first time on one of these reviews, Alison. How are you feeling?
Just a little nervous, but I did guest star a couple times on Twitch streams and that was fun. So I think we'll be okay. And I do love this show. I watched it all the first time around too. So
Yeah, so did I. It was in that little phase where post the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I was desperate and looking for something to care about, in life, as a teenager. And the Battlestar was one of the many shows I tried in that time, and it's one of the ones that turned out to be good, and I really liked it. So
great.
yeah, of course we will start not with season 1 episode 1. What silly idiot would do that? That's not where you start a TV show. You start a TV show, in this case, with part 1 of the miniseries, because that's what this had first. It had a 2-part miniseries before it got greenlit as a TV show. So we're talking about miniseries part 1 today, right? So there's two 90-minute or so parts to this. And like I said, we will... Obviously, spoilers for the episode we're talking about. That should be expected, but we'll keep
no future spoilers.
Yeah, no future spoilers, and to tell maybe the end, and we'll warn you before we do that if we do have something we want to bring up. I don't know if we will this episode. I feel like this episode's going to mostly be talking about how they introduce all the characters and the core concepts.
Some of the relationships that we see already clearly being developed, which was really interesting to watch.
It was interesting to go back to that, because obviously I have lots of memories of who these characters are and what their relationships were, and I didn't remember how early some of those things were being seeded, which is obviously what I was noticing in this episode, and so on. I guess actually a question before we get into this. Obviously we both like this show, but did you see the original Battlestar Galactica before this one?
I have seen an episode or two here or there, but before you start cracking the age jokes, yes, I was alive when the original was on. I have vague memories of having watched a few episodes or from maybe from my childhood, but what I more remember is, catching a few reruns later on. It looks very 70s when you look at it now, especially. Everything is very clunky and orange, and it's not surprising it didn't last. It was in that post-Star Trek, let's put a whole bunch of stuff in space kind of era that it came out.
Yeah. For the record, I never even alluded to you being older than me, but you've revealed it to the world.
You were going to say it eventually. I have watched a lot of your reviews, Peter. There was no chance it wasn't going to come up.
I would never have done so. But now you can't say anything. Now when I make an age joke, it's your fault because you told everyone. So
no.
Here we are. Yeah, that's the way it is. I've never seen the original Battlestar Galactica. So I actually didn't know when I first watched this that when they show what the Cylons look like, and I mean, we'll get into the lore here in a second, but you see the museum and what the Cylons looked like during the Cylon War 40 years ago. I believe that is just the original designs of the Cylons from the old show that they used for that, more or less.
The one I noticed really quickly, a little later on in the episode, I think was actually more advanced. What was the original design was the plans that the officer was looking at the space station. Okay. At the very beginning, when he pulled out the plans that he was looking at, the diagrams, that was the old. It was much larger, clunkier. It was like a white. It looked a lot more like a stormtrooper from Star Wars, honestly.
Which makes sense because it was people in suits, I assume, on that show. But that's what I was meaning. Yeah, I was meaning the diagram. And I know we see like a physical one in like the museum, but like even that those diagrams, I was like, oh, I think that's just the original Cylons.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I mean, because they do kind of look cool in like a, you know, an old school cheesy sci-fi kind of way. But the Cylons we have in this, the actual robot looking ones, have got a much more modernized. Although I say that this is now 23 years ago, so we're going to have this weird thing of like it's modern, but also it's over 2 decades old now, and like this feels like TV of that era.
It's that whole retro futuristic almost kind of vibe. They're much more streamlined, and yet.
Yeah. Well, the thing that gets me is, and this came first by a little bit, but I definitely can feel this came from the same era as Lost, because it's got the big ensemble cast that we solely introduced throughout the first episode here, where it's like we have all these casts, some of them know each other and have existing relationships, but there's a wide variety. There's people on the Galactica itself, which is obviously a starship, which I should probably start maybe I've just been talking about the basic premise of the show and what we're actually starting with here, at least in this episode. Obviously, the series itself has a specific plot line or a specific sort of like synopsis I could give, but I wouldn't do that yet.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet in this first episode.
But here, what they've established, and this is mostly text at the start of the episode that comes up, explaining the lore, is there's 12 colonies, planets that are populated by humans, and they built robots called Cylons, which are AI, and eventually they became smart enough.
I'm going to interrupt you for just a second here.
Oh, go on.
What the text specifically says is the Cylons were created by man. It doesn't say they were built, and I think that's a very deliberate word choice that they give us right at the beginning.
Okay, no, that's fair. But they revolted, right? They eventually decided to fight back, and a very, very big war happened that spanned some time, lots of casualties, until eventually they had to come to some kind of armistice. And it's like, okay, we have peace, and the Cylons left to go find their own planet, their own home world, right? Pucci went to his home world, right? Cylons went to go look for their own world. And they set up a space station, and that's kind of what we're teasing in the visuals at the start as this text is coming up, is that there's this space station that's sole purpose is for a delegate from the humans to go and meet a delegate from the Cylons, just to keep some kind of diplomatic channel open for potential future interaction. And as it tells us, humans send someone every year. The Cylons have never sent anyone, right, in 40 years.
In over 40 years. No one has seen or heard from the Cylons in over 40 years. So it's been a good long time.
Yeah, so he sits there, and it's very ominous. There's kind of a very eerie atmosphere to it. It's very grainy looking, and the way it's directed is really trying to make you feel the it's kind of the emptiness of it, right? It just feels like this big tin can that he's sitting in, just waiting for no one to show up. And then, of course, to his surprise, this blonde woman walks in
with a couple of Cylons. First, the robots walk in themselves and kind of position themselves at either end, either side of the doorway, like guards. And then this gorgeous blonde woman walks in.
Yeah, and the Cylons obviously are CG, and I was curious coming into this how much the CG was going to hold up, or if it was going to feel really old by today's standards, just because it was a TV, CG, and well, that might not mean much now in 2026. At the time, it did mean something. TV shows didn't have the effects that the movies did, and didn't have the budget for it. It looks a bit soft, you can tell it's CG. I don't think it's going to fool anyone,
No.
But it doesn't stick out really ugly either, which is a kind of a testament, honestly, because a lot of stuff from this era does. So it feels like they did put in some effort with that, at least in this miniseries. Maybe we'll notice it's not as consistent on the episode to episodes as we get later on, but yeah. But anyway, the atmosphere here is very eerie, and it sets up all this stuff. And then, the blonde woman, who we later find out is number 6, is, asks him if he's alive. He's kind of shocked. And I love this detail that he's put out photos of his family. He's got kids' photos in front of him.
A desk there. I don't know how long he's expected to be there initially, when they haven't heard from anyone in over 40 years. Like, is he supposed to stay there for 24 or 48 hours or whatever? Yeah. It's not really clear.
That's an interesting perspective. What I was thinking was that I love it from the idea that this attractive woman makes a move on him and he's like family or the photos are sitting right there, and it's like so we know that he's cheating here if he if he actually reciprocates any of this. Obviously, it doesn't last very long because immediately the Cylons blow up the station, killing him. And seemingly this woman who, I mean, obviously from later on in the episode we know she is herself a Cylon, but we don't know that in the first scene as we're watching it. But I mean that's the setup of this.
She asks him, "Are you alive?"
Yeah, and then she says, "Prove it," when he says yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's kind of the eerie, the war, the backstory, and then obviously introduces the Galactica itself, which is a starship that has fighter pilots that launch from it, and it's a.
I think it's a Battlestar, actually.
It's a Battlestar, yes. I'm using words from other things to describe it for people who don't know it in the context of this show, and it's notably kind of got an old school design. It's clearly inspired by real military like submarine stuff, even though it is a bit more spacious. And the big lore thing they set up early on, and they kind of do this because it's getting decommissioned soon. Adama, who's our commander, he's going to retire because it's peacetime. He's getting old, although obviously his retirement's not going to be going to any effect for a while yet. But
one more day till retirement, damn it.
But there's a tour guide going around, like this place is a museum, giving us a lot of exposition, and that's how we learn a lot of stuff here.
Yeah, he observes that, you might see phones with cords, and it might seem a little outdated, but the Battlestar Galactica was built not to be able to be disrupted by Cylons, and we get into some more detail on this later, but the idea of networking things is not done on this ship. And honestly, maybe that seemed a little bit more quaint, but okay when this first came out. Now, when you hear it, doesn't it sound a little like, no, that would never happen? Like, there's no way one commander or one officer would be able to say, no, I'm going to dictate and not have anything connected to each other on my ship. Like, would anything really work that way?
No, that's the point though. Is the entire point of this is that they're fighting an enemy that can like cyber attack really easily because they're AI, they're robots. So the whole point is they built ships during the war, and the Galactica being one of the main ones that would not be affected by that. Everything's analog. There's computers, but they're not connected to each other. And the point of that is that the enemy they're fighting is specifically designed, and it's why the Galactica survives, right?
Right.
I mean, obviously. We won't get into like part 2 yet, but even in this very episode, we hear by the end of this episode that almost every other Battlestar is
other Battlestars, which was about a quarter of the fleet, what they know so far, have been destroyed.
All they're hearing is that they're all going down. So part of the reason why Galactica even has a chance is because it does have this old school, and it's not even like it's old school because it's 40 years old. No, even at the time it sounds like it was old school by design because it was meant to combat all this other technology that would get in the way. So I've always liked that bit of the lore, and just how that makes it sort of stand out is having this kind of like this retro future, but a very realistic. Because normally I think when you say retro future, you imagine like something a bit more like, I don't know, cheesy, I guess. I think here it's retro in a way where it's like, no, it feels dirty and grimy, like a submarine kind of thing.
It absolutely does. Yeah, I was going to say grungy. Like, it absolutely feels so real and grounded. And that's a big part of it, is that it doesn't look like TNG, for example. It's not overly high tech. It feels like a very, like a freighter or like the Nostromo or something.
Yeah, because compared to just a couple of quick examples, you brought up Star Trek, which is obviously just this kind of like hyper sleek future, and then you've got obviously futures where spaceships have got nothing but holograms and glass, like this, like screens and things like that, and then you've got another realistic take, which is something like The Expanse, where it's all kind of like, hey, what does actual space travel look like? Let's just sort of take it a little bit ahead in time to what we would need if we were actually traveling in space. This is not doing that. This isn't going, we're going to base it on what NASA does and take that a little bit further. Like I said, this is sort of, no, we're looking actually at like kind of traditional military like ships instead, and going with that kind of aesthetic, down to the fact that when they start drawing things on the, like, they've got like a map like screen on the table and stuff like that, and they're plotting things. It's like, oh yeah, this is just old school stuff.
Mhm.
But it's also, so it feels grounded, but at the same time, it's not like they put that. I mean, unless it comes later, and I just don't remember it. But like, I don't think this show ever tries to explain like how the fake gravity works on the ship or anything like that. I don't think they ever get concerned with that. Yeah.
No,
So
and the other, the smaller planes that the individual or pairs of pilots are going out in,
mm,
they're all wearing like helmets and suits so that they have oxygen. So they're a little bit more like realistic fighter pilots
yeah.
than on the Battlestar itself.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense as well, because I don't even think it's that the ships that are going out and don't have like atmosphere inside them. I think it's more just the idea that if you're a fighter pilot, there's a very good chance you're going to get fired upon, and if let's say there's a hole suddenly appears, you need to be prepared. You can't just be sitting there with no helmet on, because then you'll just die. So that feels like space safety 101, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
So.
fair.
Yeah, so no, I like all that kind of setup of it, but yeah, we got a shit ton of characters, or sorry, a frack ton of characters, to use the parlance here.
Of the show, yeah. So we
Yeah,
cut to a scene early on where we have Starbuck, Boomer, Kilo, Exo Ty, and another, I think, unnamed officer playing basically poker. I don't know if their space poker's a little different. Their cards are like, I don't know,
but
hexagon shaped or something.
let's
Yes.
talk. This is the important thing here, right? Let's get this clear, right? And this is I was noticing this even in this very first episode. The faxes, everything, all the paper, the corners must be cut off. This is important. This is how you know that we're in an advanced civilization, is that paper does not have corners.
I suppose, yeah.
No rectangles allowed, okay? Everything has to be, I guess they're technically octagons, but I don't know if it has to be even sides to be called an octagon, but regardless. Anyway,
Yeah.
you may continue.
That was an 8-sided figure. Okay, so we cut to this great scene of all of these characters who we don't know yet, and like I said, that one other officer, I'm not sure if we ever know his name. We've got several, notable characters here sitting around a table playing poker together. Starbuck is chomping on a cigar. Um, Ty is drinking. There's a shocker. And you can sense a little tension because Ty is kind of going after Starbuck, asking her how she got her nickname, asking her, or her call sign, I guess. I think he calls it a nickname, but they call them call signs. He says something about her being in the brig or being in trouble when she was a cadet, something like that. And Starbuck makes a dig about his wife and kind of says, "So how's things going with the wife there?" And he doesn't really say anything, but there's this look of like hatred on his face that you can just tell there's already some really intense history or something is going on here. And she knew exactly what to say to, like, "You're going to try to get to me. I know how to get to you, buddy. So don't even try it." Right. And Starbucks gets a hand that is full colors, which is apparently, like a royal flush, an ultimate winning hand. And Ty flips the table. He's really upset about it. And Starbuck punches him in the face and winds herself up in the brick.
Yeah,
Immediately cuts to a scene. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. I was gonna say, well, I mean, he's our superior officer, which I like. What I like about this is that he absolutely flipped the table to invoke a fight. So it does give us a little bit of a sense of his temper, or at the very least that he's maybe a bit of a dick, knowing that he wouldn't be the one that gets in trouble.
Sure.
So I think that's there. And I think also the filming of that scene, there's a lot of like the camera kind of like constantly moving around the group
Circling
at the
around
table.
them, yeah.
It's very constantly moving, and that kind of lines up with the previous scene where we're going around the ship and Adama's practicing his speech, and like he runs into Starbuck and he runs into some of the others. I think Tyrell's one of them, and the tour guide's going around. Is a lot of like long takes. It might even be one long take. I can't remember, but like there's a lot of like constant movement and like feeling. I think that if there's nothing else they do, they make it feel like this ship is alive with people who are all kind of working like a well-oiled machine. Even though clearly this thing's not seen battle in a long time. This is it's literally been turned into a museum because it is.
Yeah,
it's old.
There's a really funny line about that later. We'll get there.
Yeah. So. No, it's I think the character introductions are largely very good. You know, it does something smart where it's like everyone seems to want to like shake Adama's hand and say, "Hey, you're retiring. I want to take this opportunity to
Been
say
an
this."
honor to serve with you, sir.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been an honor. Shake your hand. So later on in the episode, when shit's going down, and like say Tyrell, for example, like kind of like not even fights him, but just kind of gives like an opposing view, and Adama has to sort of like get in his face as the captain or the commander, and it has a bit more weight behind it because the first 30 minutes of this episode were all nothing but backpatting, I should say, and you know all this, you know, the pomp and circumstance. Even though, and it's not that they all feel like they're all phonies. Actually, if anything, it feels like they're all kind of out of element here because they're not really comfortable with this being all for show. It's like, no, we're actually all military, and we feel like we're kind of like almost like relics because like none of us are needed. And then of course by halfway through this episode they are needed and they're the last like hope of like survival or whatever. So there's a nice kind of flip of showing the mood in that first chunk of feeling like they're not needed to being more needed than they ever want to be because we're in the most dire straits ever. Because, you know, because by the time we get halfway through the episode and there's nuclear bombs going off everywhere and it's like, oh shit, like the circumstances could not be more dire at this point. And we go from almost retiring to being, oh, you might actually be in command of the entire military now. Like that's and
at the point
spectrum.
that he kind of realizes he is, and we as the audience realize that he is, it does take on that whole different perspective of, well, damn, he was really ready to be out, and they pulled him back in. You know, there was no choice.
Yeah, to use The Godfather Part 3 is a line delivery. So yeah, I mean, obviously, we have Edward James Olmos as Commander Adama, our leader of sorts. Although there's a little bit of dispute for leadership by the end of the episode, of course, with Roslyn, who is another character we get introduced to early on, and her introduction is in
McDowell.
Mary McDowell, yeah, and she's in a doctor's office in her first scene, being told that she has cancer. And as soon as we get enough details to know that that's what it is, the audio just fades out, and like the sound of ships going by take over. We don't need to hear anything else. Like we get it. She's got the worst news ever. Her days are numbered, and that's where she starts this story before everything goes down. And we have Starbuck, of course, Kate Sackhoff. Who's the pilot with the attitude? Obviously, was originally a man in the original series. Something comes up a lot in the trivia, if you will. So
Boomer as well is a woman and was also a male character in the original series.
I actually, like, to be honest, I don't even know how many of these characters were even in the original series. I just know Starbuck's the one that always comes up as the one that changed between shows.
Boomer and Apollo both were, and Adama, the senior Adama, I am not 100% sure about anybody else.
Yeah, I would assume that all, like, number 6 and anyone like her probably weren't in the original series.
No, because the Cylons were just the old bots in the old series,
That makes sense. And there's some other big characters we got to talk about, such as Gaius Baltar, who's also on the same planet as Roslyn, which is Caprica, which is the main planet we hear about. There's 12 of them, but Caprica's the one we always come back to and talk about. Yes. And he is like your superstar scientist character, but he's kind
of the Ian Malcolm of Battlestar. He's like the rock star scientist. Yeah, kinda. He's being interviewed on a TV or some kind of broadcast about his controversial views on advancing AI and networking and things like that. And he's very dismissive of how those rules and those regulations were holdovers from the Cylon War. And, we need to be more building our technology.
To be fair, it makes some sense. If you lived in a society that was at war for years with robots because they grew a conscience and like rebelled, like you'd probably have some strict rules about making new artificial intelligence, I would assume. Like it feels like something you would want to keep a lid on a little bit. The other thing, though, is that in that interview scene where he's on TV, and they do like a little stylized thing where we're looking at a TV screen as he's like getting introduced, and the camera kind of like turns round and we see him sitting there. He's on via satellite, if you will, sitting in his house like a Skype call,
staring off into the distance because he's all deep and whatnot.
Oh, of course, yeah, it all feels very pretentious. But the first thing he does is say, "Oh, actually, before we get to the science that I'm going to talk about, can I just say that you're very lovely, and I just would like to thank you for being." Like, he's flirting immediately, and that kind of sets up the other part of his character is that he is just. I don't even know if horn dog's the right word, but he obviously. He's in a relationship with number 6, who shows up at his place fairly early on. He's also in bed with another woman later on in this episode, and not to spoil anything, but this is not a trend that subsides anytime soon. This is just very much who he is.
It doesn't become quite obvious till later that we never hear a name for this beautiful blonde woman, and then we find out she's the 6th Cylon model. But you don't quite even notice it until it becomes so obvious later on.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter that much early on if she has a name anyway. Like, hell, her entire introduction is mysterious woman. Like, she's up to things, including, might I add, and I kind of remembered the start of this scene, but I did not remember her killing a baby, on Caprica. Like that actually caught me off guard. Like, I remember her looking at a baby. I did not remember her putting her hand in after talking about how that neck supports all that weight. That's so impressive.
Tiny, so fragile. Can I hold it? Can I hold the baby? And the mother's a little apprehensive and says sure. And then you just hear like a neck crack. You don't see her actually do it. Ugh, that's yeah.
Yeah, she walks away, and the mother obviously reacts in the aftermath. I guess the surprise for me going back to this scene is that she does look, number 6 that is, she does look not necessarily happy with what she's just done. She does look a little bit like, oops, whoops-a-daisy, I think I just killed someone. Even though she knows at this point what's going to happen, she knows that everyone here is going to be dead anyway, but she doesn't look thrilled about it, right? I guess I was expecting a very neutral or maybe even like a slight evil face on her. Instead, it was It was a bit more like, oh, I actually don't feel good about what I just did there, which, or
look at how fragile these silly humans are.
Well, I mean, I think it's a sign, even like, we haven't gotten to anything else yet, but I think it's a sign that even right now in this first episode, that these Cylons aren't just, automatons. They aren't just like, we are robots, we want to be, free on our own, we want revenge. Like, I think the little bit of guilt on her face as she walks away after doing that says that there is, like, something in there resembling empathy. There's a conscience of some sort. So,
just barely, maybe. I don't know. I guess we'll have to see as the show goes on.
Yeah, I mean, it's the faintest glimmer. Don't get me wrong, given what she's a part of and what she's doing in this episode. But it's but also. Like, how many humans have the Cylons interacted with, in the last while? Like, obviously there's discussions to be had there later on down the line, but it's interesting. But yeah, the whole thing with her and Gaius Baltar, though, is that he's been giving her access to stuff. To
the defense mainframe? Let's just poke around in there for some funsies?
Yes, so when she tells him what she is, he doesn't believe her quite at first. But she makes it very clear that, because he starts getting worried that he's going to be put on trial for treason for letting her have access to that.
All he cares about is how it's going to affect him.
And then she says, it doesn't matter, there won't be anyone around to try you for it anyway. And then, I think it's right after she says that the first bright light hits from what we assume is a nuclear bomb going off.
Yeah, she says, in a few hours, no one will be left. And then she uses this phrase, which I thought was really interesting. Humanity's children are returning home today. Sounds very ominous.
So, yeah, which he does survive, of course. In fact, one of the images that I vividly remember from watching this the first time is that moment where the shockwave's coming towards them, and she kind of like says, get down, and kind of almost shields them from the blast. So... yeah, and obviously we see him pop up later, which we'll get to.
The other super important detail that is revealed for the first time in that moment is that he asks her, well, surely you're not letting yourself die. You're going to get off this planet. How are you doing that? And she says, well, I can't die because even if this body gets destroyed, my consciousness will be uploaded and then put into another body. So we learn that this human-looking Cylon woman is essentially immortal.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, anyway. So it's like, all right, so we've set that up, and as you know, and because the first half hour or so is a lot of like character introductions. We haven't even got to Apollo yet, who's Adama's son. And Apollo, which is his call sign, his name is Lee Adama, but we're always going to call him Apollo, so let's just establish that now. He arrives on the station. He asks why the automatic
ship.
landing. Sorry, on the ship. Yeah, sorry. Too much Deep Space Nine and Babylon 5 in my recent history. And Tyrell says, "Oh, we don't have any automatic landings on Battlestar Galactica. Everything's manual. That's Commander's orders." And immediately there's this cold vibe from Apollo where he's like, "Oh,
the old man.
I bet he ordered that." And every interaction they have is very sour. He goes to see Starbuck in the brig first, and we actually find out here that she was involved with Adama's or Apollo's brother Zach, who's passed away. They talk about a funeral. And that all sort of leads to the scene where Apollo and Adama have to do a photo together, which is very awkward, where they're told to stand together and put their arms around each other or whatever. And then the final kind of like, they finally speak to each other, and some of this comes out in the open happens at the end of that sequence. And it's particularly cold. Like, Apollo wants nothing to do with Adama and clearly blames him for why his brother Zach was a pilot and why that, got him killed. He says he wasn't cut out for it, but you pulled strings to pass him anyway, and he ended up dead. So all of that is established here, and now I was actually surprised by that, because I remembered all these details, but I didn't necessarily think they were all here already in this first miniseries.
There are some other details about that will come later that were not quite revealed yet.
Oh, of course, yeah. But that was a lot more than I thought there was here.
Yeah.
Right away.
We get that sense of Lee hasn't seen his father in a couple of years since the funeral. Kara says that they talk about it sometimes, so Kara and Adama are seemingly good. The one other thing, though, is when Lee kind of first stands over Starbucks doing like push-ups in the brig, and he says that it seems familiar of him like visiting her in jail or in prison. So clearly that was what Colonel Ty was alluding to earlier, that Starbuck definitely has a history.
I think she gets thrown in the brig on a semi-regular basis, it sounds like.
Adama clearly says, like, immediately get her out of the brig when it's clear that things are real. Like, okay, we're not playing around with this stuff anymore.
Oh yeah, I mean that's what I was just going to say actually, is that when she gets first thrown in the brig, he actually goes to Ty and says, "Hey, you're really going to go through the procedure of pressing charges?" And he's like, "You goddamn right I am." And he's like, "Come on, like she's one of the best pilots we've got." Like he's already sticking up for her, and then obviously like you say, when shit hits the fan, he's like, "Get her out of the brig right now." Like, we need her.
And in that conversation, Ty denied having flipped the table first, and Adama's like, "No, you did." And he seems to not even remember that happened. So, is he drinking that much that he's blacking out, that he can't recall things that really happened? Because seemingly there's some kind of security, or there were enough other people around who saw it happen, so...
Yeah, I think what's interesting about that is that we see him drinking early on, we see him pouring booze into his coffee. Obviously, like I said, this is becoming a museum. Everyone's kind of just in this sort of like, we're just kind of winding down. Things are, turning off for good soon. And he's in that as well. And when Adama says, "Oh, did you start early today?" He's like, "I was off duty." He kind of just sort of like writes it off as, well, I wasn't working, so why wouldn't I be? I do think when stuff gets real halfway through the episode, there is like a moment where like Ty kind of like takes stock for a moment and then like goes into like XO mode, where now he's just like the hardened XO. It does feel like he gets really serious and becomes like this hardened second in command like halfway through the episode, which I think you could argue that to a new audience member he's kind of unlikable for at least the first half of this episode. Because he picks a fight with Starbuck, the scene with the Tyrell and like shutting off all the decks to like flush out the fire, like that scene that comes later, these seem like kind of harsh things, but it does kind of feel like he's making tough calls, and it feels like he really takes the job seriously once it actually matters. Like obviously when they get that first report that something's happening, that the Cylons attacking, he's the first one that says, "Oh, it's a retirement prank. Nothing's happening." Like, and Adama's like, "I don't think so," and he's taking it very seriously. So, but I think at the very least by the end of the episode, you get the sense that Ty is probably a good officer, but maybe kind of a shitty person.
I think that's a fair assessment, yeah. And Adama even kind of calls him up on it and says, like, are you the XO or not? Like, are you sober enough? Can you fucking do your job or whatever? Frack do your job, sorry.
Yeah. He slipped. Yeah, so you could just frack. Frack's fine.
I know. So, Ty makes a decision. It's revealed a little later that it cost 80-something lives, and Tyrell is really upset about it. He's complaining to Adama that if he had 40 more seconds, he could have saved more of his people. And Adama shuts him down and says, no, he made the right call. He saved the ship, and I would have done exactly the same thing. And so it's clear, I think, by Adama backing backing Colonel Ty to Tyrell, that we know, okay, this was a good decision, because I think as a viewer, until we hear that from Adama, we might be more on Tyrell's side.
Which works as well because of when I was talking earlier on about because like the scene that Tyrell has with him at the start, where he's like, "Oh, it's been an honor," and like he likes him. He's cleaned up his old fighter ship for display, and that's the one
found
that
a picture of Adama and the two and Lee and Zach as kids.
Yeah, he clearly respects him a lot. So I think it's actually quite a hard hitting moment when Adama backs up what Ty's decided, because I think it puts Tyrell in the same position as the audience to what you just described, is that because Adama's backing up, Tyrell has to begrudgingly accept it. Otherwise, because if he doesn't, then all that bullshit about saying he respects and it's been an honor working for Adama is all a lie, right? If he was being serious about that, then this is like a hard, bitter pill to swallow that, no, he's probably right then. So... yeah, it does a good thing by like doing those different setups, that this scene that forces them to be kind of on opposite ends of the argument a little bit. It forces you to sort of reconcile with like, who they actually are and the tough moments. And we've kind of talked about Tyrell a little bit here without actually saying what he is. He's like the head mechanic, right? He's the one who's fixing all the ships with his crew.
Yeah, and I think he's like the deck chief, or they call him chief. I don't know if he's very much like O'Brien actually on DS9.
I would say it's a bit more specific to like all the ship, because obviously those shows don't really have a lot of like fighter jets going out kind of thing.
Well, they have shuttlecraft more. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, well, because that seems to be his main thing, is making sure all that stuff gets to. They're more like a pit crew almost in a lot of ways. It's like come in and get fixed up, and we'll send you back out. And he's in a relationship with Boomer, who we mentioned.
They're arguing, but it turns into something else really quickly.
Well, they're just pretending, I think. I think the whole idea is they've got a script. And even like the other character we've barely mentioned Hilo. He's got this look in his face where he's like, he knows this is bullshit. He knows they're just sneaking off to have some hanky-panky. And it's like, okay, so it sets up that they're pretending, because maybe they're not allowed. Maybe it's like inappropriate for this relationship on a sort of...
Kind of seems like it, because he calls her sir, and it may be the difference in their ranks.
Yeah.
And or their roles, or some combination of the two, that she's a superior officer.
Yeah. So... so whether it's like an official thing that's technically against the rules, or they're keeping it a secret for personal reasons, either way, it's established that they're keeping it a secret. Boomer is obviously the call sign of her real name's Sharon, but she is the one of the pilots of not the fighter things, but the more like the shuttle, I guess we'll call it.
They called it a Raptor. So there's the
Raptor,
Vipers,
right.
Are the fighter planes, and that was called a Raptor. I don't remember ever hearing it, but I noted it this time.
Yeah, I never caught that watching it today, but those words, now that you're saying them, are ringing a bell from like watching the show before, as Vipers and Raptors. I didn't know what the terminology was specifically. Yeah,
and so Boomer and Hilo are in the Raptor together. I'm not entirely sure what their role or what they were doing when they were later on flying out, because they weren't those fighter pilots. Yeah.
I think, and this is me maybe remembering things from later as well, admittedly, but even here, because they sort of go out with a squad of Vipers and they sort of hang back, I think the idea is they're kind of, because when you're in space, obviously, once you're past a certain distance, you can't just communicate like easily. At one point, Adama even says, is that ship in voice range, right? That's a thing. Yeah. So I think the idea of the Raptor, at least in this context, in this episode, is that they kind of act like almost like the mission control who's looking at the radar and like giving like intel to the fighter pilots kind of thing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so they're sort of the support. They're sort of the guys in the chairs in space.
Yeah, basically, yeah. They're hanging back and they're doing that. And they've got a bit of room for passengers as well. It's like a little bus almost. So
right.
Yeah, so this is good stuff to establish here early on. Is there because that's the other thing is like the Battlestar Galactica's design has like these two kind of like sides, and the idea is that when it was in use, both sides had like docking bays or takeoffs for the Vipers to leave, but one of them has been turned into a gift shop now.
Yeah, and it's a very funny line in the episode because they're trying to figure out, like, they've got the ships, they've got the fuel, they can power them up, they can send them out, but there's some difficulty with, like, actually getting them to the bays, and it's a very quick conversation, but yeah, they're like, well, why can't, and I think it's Starbucks says, why can't we just launch them out the other side of the ship, and they say it's a gift shop now. It's a really funny moment.
Yeah, well, what I like about that, actually, is that, yeah, they have all these, like, ships, but, like, most of them are technically, literally, there for museum purposes. They're there to just be on display. And so it's actually, like, Tyrell and his crew have to kind of, like, all right, let's get them into, like, actual working condition here. Let's get the engines going, and they have some failures. But I do like that element of this, though, that because it was being decommissioned, and they only had, like, a small amount of active Vipers at the ready, it does give this sense of, like, that this ship wasn't well stocked of things because it was supposed to be shutting down.
They talk about they don't really have a lot of firepower. They don't have munitions. But during the decommissioning ceremonies, one of the things was that a bunch of ships were doing a flyby. So they know that the ships can fly. They might just not have a lot of ammo or firepower or whatever. But a bunch of them are flying out with Kilo and Boomer and the Raptor kind of supporting behind them, and they realize there are some Cylons coming towards them, and they're getting ready to engage them with whatever they have. But as the Cylons come close to them, they lose power. All of the Raptors, all of the Vipers, pardon me, die.
Yeah. Which feeds into some of the reason why we're hearing all the other battle stars are getting put down is we're hearing reports that they're losing power, and it sounds like this is tied into the whole they're in the mainframe and they're able to like infect stuff, and it's why Galactica might be somewhat immune from this main tactic going forward, which is cool. I like all that the idea though the resources being really limited because it ups the stakes and makes it feel like things are more desperate right away. Of like, okay, we only had so much. It's kind of like, like there's one thing to prepare for the apocalypse where you've got like a big shelter with like, food stocked up, but it's another thing when it hits you suddenly and like, oh, the fridge was already half empty. Oh no. Like, what am I doing now? It's that kind of idea, but on a bigger, military scale.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of how I've been, having to get a whole bunch of groceries before snowstorms recently.
Yes,
so,
yes.
Yeah, exactly. But Lee Adama is not still on Galactica when the fighting starts. He was just there temporarily to take part in that decommissioning ceremony because obviously he's Adama's son, and he is escorting Rosalind's ship back to Caprica.
Yes. And when we say her ship, we don't really mean like she doesn't own the ship. Yeah, it's like
the ship she is on.
It's like a transport ship. It was a bunch of passengers. It just by the end of the episode, it kind of becomes her ship for reasons.
It does. It does a government ship.
Yes.
/ sort of space shuttle, like shuttle bus back to Caprica.
Yeah.
She was just out there for this to be a government representative at that ceremony.
Yeah, I will say that ship was a lot bigger than I thought it was because I felt like you said, like a little shuttle bus. But then later on, like Apollo's like landed his Viper inside like a docking area, and I'm like, wait, where was all this space? This is a lot bigger than I thought. So worth mentioning that. And the reason why, of course, it becomes more important is because everyone higher ranking than her in the government. She is the Secretary of Education, apparently. And
she's number 40 something in line.
Yeah,
but mentioned.
They all die, so she gets sworn in as the new president.
As president. And interestingly, when she gets the message back, she says, we need a priest. So she needs a priest to swear her in. Interesting detail.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, spirituality and faith does play a part in this show, and it's not like in a ton of this episode, but that is one element of it. The other is when number 6, actually, before she's revealed what she is to Baltar.
Right. Yeah. She says something about she did it because God wanted her to.
Yeah, which obviously once we know she's like, a Cylon, it's like, well, what God is she talking about then in that case? Is she talking about the traditional idea of God? Is she talking about something in the code? Like, like the idea of the God in the machine kind of thing? Like, what are we talking about exactly? So, and interesting thematic stuff being set up there at the very least.
She references her faith, and Baltar kind of poo-poos it, sort of is like that man of science. I don't know why you believe in such foolishness kind of thing.
Yeah, he's saying all this. He's got like the most ridiculous like suit on, and he walks away. He's like, are you a scientist or do you think you're a model? Like, I'm not really sure which way you're leaning towards more, but that's very much him. And the whole idea of like the leadership though, because by the end of the episode, the whole thing that's set up is that she's become president as Roslin. And she's given orders, and by this point, Apollo's there, right? Apollo helped like protect the ship when a Cylon ship showed up. Which, by the way, I like that the Cylon Raiders, which are basically the Cylon fighter pilot or jets, if you want to call them that, like there's no actual pilots because they're robots, so the ship itself is just the pilot. So they're just these sort of like disc-looking things with wings. It's kind of cool.
There's a guy on the ship. It's the same guy who was doing the publicity on Galactica earlier. His name is Aaron Doral, which is mentioned a couple of times, but it's not that memorable.
Can I just say, actually, on Doral, is that if you'd asked me before we started watching this episode today to name characters, I would have gotten a lot of them. And there was a couple, don't get me wrong, that I was a little bit like... There's a guy like on the main deck of Galactica. When I saw him, I went, "Oh, that's," and I couldn't quite think of it. And I got close, and it ended up being Gaeta, right? But
Felix.
I was thinking of, is it Gaia? No, it's not Gaia, and it was Gaeta. I was like, okay, I got kind of close. I could not in a million years have told you Doral was this guy's name.
Me either. No, definitely not. Definitely not. I knew he was someone we had seen at some point, but
yes.
He immediately is kind of challenging when Roslin before she's even sworn in, she kind of starts taking command. And he says, "Who put you in charge?" And she said, "Well, this is a government ship and I'm the senior government representative here, so that puts me in charge." And she doesn't argue with him. She just says it in, I love this actress. She has this just beautiful way of speaking and kind of calm delivery and everything, but it's very matter of fact. And so Doral, as soon as he finds out that Apollo is coming on board, goes and kind of whines to him about, there's this woman in charge.
Yeah, that was the exact joke I was about to make, is that he goes to Apollo, he goes, "There's a woman is trying to tell me what to do. I don't like it. Yes. Do something about it, Apollo." And then, of course, Apollo talks to her for like a minute and realizes, oh no, she's actually quite sensible and clearly should be in charge.
Right. And says the lady's in charge in a very respectful way. But also you can tell that Apollo respects a command structure. And Roslin, being the senior government official on board, that command structure makes sense to him. So... it's going to make sense. The other little note there is that when they're down in the cargo bay or wherever they are, where Apollo first comes on board, is that we find out they have some electric pulse generators on the ship that they got from Galactica that were there for some reason. We don't quite know what that means yet, but I think it might be interesting later.
Sure. No, I like Lee or Apollo. I'll just to be consistent. I'll keep saying Apollo. I like him kind of backing Roslin after he talks to her for a minute, because it's like I think he would like accept that she's in charge anyway, but I think after speaking to her, I think he respects her like authority.
Absolutely.
More. So I like that about it, and which obviously, because the episode ends on the cliffhanger, well, not exactly, technically it ends on the cliffhanger of did Roslin's ship get nuked, right? That's kind of what it ends on. But the main drama though right before that is this idea of the conflicting command of the new president, Roslin,
versus the military.
Yeah, versus Adama, who's, it's like, oh, wait, we're listening to politicians, we're at war. And that's kind of a big thing about this miniseries.
Yeah, and he's really upset, not just that it's a politician in charge, but that it's a school teacher who's in charge,
yes.
heaven forbid.
I believe that's what he said, yes, something about a school teacher. What I like, though, about this is the realization that kind of plays out across both parts, admittedly. I don't want to get too spoilery here, but just this idea that in this episode, Adama and the ship at large practically is still very much in the we're still trying to fight a war here that's starting. Even though by the end of the episode, Rosalind's saying we're losing, all we can do is try and find survivors and help where we can, get as many people as possible, and try and survive. Whereas Adama right now is still very much trying to say, how do we get more weapons so we can fight back?
Well, they find out, right, that there's a weapons depot that's not, I guess, right next door, because they're going to have to do some FTL, faster than light travel, to get to it. And this takes some precise calculating, because it's not something we do every day. It's kind of like the jump gates in Babylon 5, I assume.
Yeah,
this is
the first time it comes up in the episode, because they don't mention it at all episode, and then it's like, hey, the Cylons are between us and this munitions base. And Ty's like, hey, I see that, I know that look in your eye, Adama, we can't do that, it's dangerous. He's like, let's do it. I don't know if it's because it's dangerous all the time. I was getting because later on they ask Rosalind's ship, like the pilot on that ship, hey, is your FTL drive working? And he's like, yeah, which made me think that it's not actually that rare to use it. It's more maybe just that the Galactic has not done it in 20 years, and it's like, it's kind of like we're going to use this computer from 1994 to try and render the new Pixar movie. It's probably going to blow up. That's the vibe I was getting from it.
Yeah, and a sense that there's sort of a mention of you trained for this, and it's going to take some precise calculating. So it's the kind of thing where you don't want to make a mistake with your jump and wind up in the middle of a planet or something like that. So it's we don't really get all the details here, but there's kind of that hint that it's something that can be done, but it might be a little bit dangerous, or it might be a little haphazard to do it.
It's something that's going to be very fleshed out very quickly in future episodes, for sure. No, that stuff is interesting when that comes up, again, for lore and mechanics reasons. So that's awesome.
There's one other plot point we haven't really touched upon too much, which is we mentioned Boomer and Hilo being in the Raptor. They don't get taken out, but their ship does get hurt a little bit. The ship does get dinged up a little bit, but they have enough inertia that they can turn off all of their power and just look like debris, so probably nobody will notice them, and they can float all the way to Caprica. They're close enough. So we see Hilo and Boomer down on the planet, and we start seeing there are, mushroom clouds in the background, but a bunch of them. So clearly bombs are going off all over the place. Boomer's like, trying to fix the fuel line like a mechanic, like you'd see somebody under a car in a TV show or something. And then a whole bunch of people are fleeing towards them, thinking that they're a rescue ship. And they're not. It's not as tiny as a Viper, but it's still a very small ship that they're in. And
and it's not even just a concern of fitting people. Like they flat out say, like, oh, there's literally a number limit, or we won't be able to get out of orbit. Like, the weight dictates if we can actually break the atmosphere. So we can take maybe how many kids are there? We'll take the kids first. Okay,
and
there's
then
room.
They can fit three more adults. And it's like, we'll do a little number lottery, and first person, second person, and then they say the third number, right? And there's a moment here where Baltar's in this crowd, right? Baltar, this is where he's shown up again. And this old woman next to him says, hey, Sonny, I can't read. I don't have my glasses. Can you please have a look at my number? And he looks down at it, and it's the number they just said, which I think was 47. And there's just this moment where he's clearly thinking about it. He's considering doing the really bad thing. But to his credit, he does not, right? Admittedly, there's a little ding in that, because by this point, because he's been standing there for a minute, Hilo
he starts
notices
to
him.
recognize him. He's like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
your guy is Baltar. So it's almost like maybe being identified of who he is made him go, oh wait, no, they'll know who did this if I trick this little old woman out of her seat. So he's like, hey, this lady's got number 47, and he helps her up, and then Hilo makes the choice that he will give up. Oh, sorry.
This is such a tragic and heroic moment at the same time, because honestly, it's just something that was always really memorable to me. We don't know a lot about this character yet, but he says why should I have a place? Why should I get to live over one of the smartest, brightest minds of our generation? So Hilo gives up his seat on the ship for Baltar. Yeah,
it's an interesting moment because we know obviously a lot more about Baltar's current situation than he does.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Speaking of heroic, yeah.
So we're thinking he's more of a piece of shit. At the very least, he's an idiot, and let this woman, seduce her way into the defense mainframe through him.
Yes.
And it's like, okay. And he was just considering what he was considering with the old lady as well. So we're not necessarily thinking he's the greatest person in the world. But at the same time, from a pure tactical point of view, maybe having like the genius scientist like around might still be a good idea anyway. Absolutely. But I also kind of read this as like Hilo realizing that, hey, these people that are left behind might need someone who like can take charge and maybe actually help them survive a little bit or something. I don't know. So that said, the one guy does try and jump on the ship as it's taken off, and Hilo has to shoot him. Yeah. Yeah.
So he's basically defending the ship as it leaves, and it certainly seems like, well, he definitely knows he's gonna die.
Yeah. So it's a good moment, and obviously I think I wonder if this is a sort of thing in the future where Hilo would look back, maybe if he ever does learn more about Gaius Baltar, if he's like, well, that was a huge mistake that day. Bad decisions were made.
I've made a huge mistake, yeah.
But that's good. And obviously, the thing is, though, from a TV writing perspective, we've spent so much time introducing Gaius Baltar, there was no way he wasn't going to become a main character.
We were only wondering how he was going to be saved. He was not going down on Caprica, for sure.
So, yeah, that's definitely a big part of it. Also, this is just a minor detail, and it's not a TV detail or so, but see when Six first goes to him and they have sex?
Huh?
Like, I don't think I've ever seen someone wear shiny underwear before, but she was wearing, like, this shiny underwear, which I just thought was a weird detail. Like,
yeah, it almost looked like vinyl or something, or like patent leather maybe,
like, which is normal if that's like the outer.
It was a choice.
Yeah, if that's the outerwear, if that's like the dress or something, or like whatever she's wearing, fine. But like the underwear is a weird choice. I did they think that was futuristic looking or something? Like it's shiny.
I will not deny that Trisha Helton is a very, very attractive woman. She is quite beautiful, and obviously portrayed in that quite beautiful way when we see her here. So
I hadn't noticed.
Oh, frack that. But we do see, you know what, when they're having sex, she's on top of him, and you see like her spine like glowing through her skin, which is also kind of an interesting little, I guess that's a Cylon intimacy thing or something.
It's a cool visual. And even just the idea that she's on top is a little bit like, she's the one in charge here in this relationship, right? His ego might not think that, but she definitely is, and that's
for sure
a detail worth mentioning. So,
because she even says later, like when they're talking about the whole defense mainframe thing, that he was her mission.
Yes,
she was sent there on a mission to seduce him to get this access, which helped the Cylons destroy the 12 colonies. So it's good job, Baltar.
It's funny that early on he's like panicking because she says, "Do you love me?" And he's like, "Oh, I was worried there for a second. You were being serious about this whole love thing." And then later on, he's like, "Oh God, you tricked me into like helping you murder like billions of people. I kind of wish you were just a lovesick, romantic. Oh no."
Yeah.
Oh well. So yeah, guy. I mean, Baltar.
Poor Baltar. Poor Baltar and his problem.
I mean, Baltar is definitely a character who's going to get a lot of discussion in this show because he's very interesting as a character. He's a very flawed character, but he is, but he's definitely
complex. He is never just one note.
Yes,
sure.
yes. And to be fair as well, James Callis, who plays him, does a good job of making him
very, very good. Yeah.
he's always engaging to watch. Whether you like him or hate him, he's
Sure.
always that. So yeah, so that's fair play on him. Yeah, actually, it's funny because obviously, to use the term red shirts, there's some minor characters that are here, and it's funny how some of them are like, oh, I know that they're going to be around for a while because I know them, like Dee, for example, who's in like she's the Uhura, basically of Galactica. She's the one doing all the comm stuff. But you see her briefly. You see, I think her name is Callie, who works with Tyrell. She's like part of that crew. Sure. There's also another guy who doesn't make it by the end of the episode, and I'm like, oh, I bet he dies soon because I don't remember who he is.
Yeah, one of the other mechanics, basically. Yeah.
So he's a red
shirt.
You're
right. We do have the advantage of that hindsight. There was we kind of skipped over it, but there was a briefing scene where when Tara was in jail, and they talked about some other pilot was going to replace her, and then they said that Apollo was there and he was going to be flying in Adama's old ship, and Apollo was kind of like, okay, great. He was not happy about that.
Yeah, he was like feigning. There was like an awkward silence, and then he eventually goes, "Oh, it's an honor." I'm like, "Oh, is it?" Sounds like such a big honor.
Yeah. But you kind of, when you looked across that room, because there's maybe 30, 40 other soldiers in there or pilots or whatever, and there were definitely a couple that I thought looked familiar, but most of them, probably just seat fillers.
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be red shirts for sure. Actually, one of the things I was thinking about as I was watching, because one of the things I remember a lot about this show is how good the music is. And notably, this miniseries is not composed by Bear McCreary, who does the show. So that was interesting, because a lot of it is, like, there's all these military drums in the soundtrack, and some of that kind of sticks around, like, in the score to an extent, but it's a lot more heavy here. There is one little bit of music, though, that I feel like is quite memorable, which is kind of it's whenever Six is doing something, there's kind of this kind of like high pulse kind of track. It's very memorable. It's very eerie and works. There's like a sense of mystery to it, which sticks out. But a lot, like the opening credits or the closing credits, are all just sort of these drums beating and stuff like that. It's not none of the memorable stuff from later that I associate with this show's music are quite here yet. So I'm looking forward to that when we get to it.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so. Plus, other characters we're not mentioned yet. Billy, who's Rosalind's aide, like her assistant, he's there.
Yep. He, has a couple cute interactions with Dee Dwala, the Uhura of this ship, the communications officer. Kind of runs into her when they first show up and says something like, "Oh, I'm a visitor," and all the soldiers are in their skivvies and just washing, getting up, and he's in a full suit, and she kind of just looks him up and down like, yeah, we never would have guessed.
I wonder if technically they're sailors, because they're technically on it's a navy, but I mean, I don't know if I'd ever...
Are they? I don't know. Yeah, are they Marines? Are they...
I've never heard of people in a spaceship in a movie or TV show be referred to as sailors before, but technically it might be the right term, but regardless, yeah.
I'm trying to think, and I just can't quite remember if we do ever hear a collective noun like that.
I don't think so. Soldiers is fine.
They call them the army or...
Yeah.
I think they them as military at some...
Oh, sure, yeah. But military covers it, like all the branches.
It covers everything, yeah, for sure. So.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Certainly leaves us on that, as you mentioned before, the cliffhanger of have Rosalind's ship, which is now called Colonial One. The captain kind of looks at her and starts to say the old name of the ship, which was just like a call number, and says, no, this is Colonial One now, like Air Force One, because she's the president. So but I liked that little moment. But has that ship with Adama and Rosalind and everybody on it been destroyed? That's where we leave this episode.
Yeah, but I wanted to point out, though, that pilot looks very excited by the fact that he gets to say Colonial One. He looks like he's, oh, you know what? 18 billion people died today, but I'm flying Colonial One now, so things are looking up for me.
I mean, I love that it's so much personal aggrandizement as it is recognition and respect for Rosalind. in
You're
that
probably
moment.
right, but I just it gave me a chuckle because it's where my mind
Okay.
went. Yeah, like I think if nothing else, this is a 90-minute or so episode that has to
Mhm,
introduce about what probably at least 10 characters prominently, and there's some other ones that
mhm.
I remember and notice more because I know they get more time later. But
For sure. For sure.
even the core like 8 to 10, right? Because if I'm
Yeah.
counting them, right, you got Adama, you got I'm just looking at the IMDb. This is the order I'm going in. You got
Adama,
Adama, Roslin,
Tides,
Starbuck, Apollo, Baltar, 6. You got Boomer, Ty. You got Tyrol.
Tyrol.
You got Hilo. That's 11.
Mhm,
And I'd say that's like maybe most of the main, and then everyone else is kind of secondary this
mhm.
episode. But that's still a lot of characters to have to establish and set up. And
Yeah,
to be
they don't
fair,
always get
I feel
they
like
don't all get major screen time, but we definitely have a sense of who all these people are, and even
yes,
some of those other secondary characters as well.
yeah. To its credit, I think I get a sense of who all those 11 people are by the end of this episode, one way or another, and I think that's
Mhm,
actually quite impressive. It does also mean though that a lot of this episode is spent, like doing that stuff, right? There's a lot of build up, which is okay, but from like just a pacing of the episode on its own right, it does mean that you're waiting until like halfway through the episode before
mhm.
anything kind of actiony, if you want to call it that, starts happening. But
That's true.
you know,
I I will say that, one of the things that BSG was noted for when it was originally on was the very realistic sort of space battles. And of
mm,
course, there is CGI, but there's got to also be models in there too for some of it. We were talking earlier about how, the Cylons are CGI when you see them at the beginning. And I'm sure some of what we're seeing is also CGI in some of those battle scenes, but there's also sort of the weightiness of a real feeling when you see like those ships flying together in scenes.
I think it is mostly CG. I don't know. I mean, obviously there'll be like a cockpit set for the Viper pilots to sit in and that kind of thing.
You don't
But
think like the Vipers were models at some point that they were shooting? It'd be interesting to, I guess. Well,
yeah, I don't actually think so. I think that's just a case of the CG is just doing its job well, honestly, in this case. But um,
okay.
yeah, I mean, it looks like it is a bit soft, but I think the overall presentation still feels quite good. It's not like
Yeah.
it's not. I think if you go back 10 years before this, stuff from that era has dated considerably more than this has, and it does
There's
have.
also stuff from the same time period that looks a lot more
Oh,
dated today.
absolutely, yeah. Uh, but this has like this sort of like grainy
That
style that's going
that
for the
grittiness, yeah,
yeah, and that kind of
that
maybe helps
keeps
hide it
it.
a little bit and give it a little bit of an aesthetic to mask it. So I think it all comes together here in this. It's so interesting though that they made this without knowing if they were even going to get to do a TV show. This was kind of like a big 3 hour pilot split in two, effectively.
Yeah, this was on the SyFy channel in the US, and that was something they kind of did at this point in time is they would make pilots by making miniseries or,
Mm.
4 to 6 hour miniseries of shows. And then if they performed well and it looked like something they could do, they would go on and make a show out of it.
Yeah. I think obviously this first discussion was a lot of like talking about the characters being introduced and the main kind of like established lore that we're setting up so far. Uh, and that'll probably change into more plot discussion in future because there'll be more plot, I think, in future episodes. But this one
Quite
is,
possibly.
yeah, it's all about just introducing everyone.
Establishing everything that's going on. I will say there were a couple things that happened in this first part that, had you asked me before, I would have sworn happened at the end of the miniseries. I
Mm,
didn't realize they happened in the first half. The one specific thing I can name is the uh Baltar getting off the planet with Boomer in the shuttle.
okay, yeah.
I would have sworn that happened at the end of the miniseries, that was a later event. But I do kind of remember what happens in the second part, and we have hints of that from the end of the first part. So we'll go there next time.
I remember how the second part ends. Like I remember like a couple of the final
Yeah,
scenes and what it reveals and stuff like that. But I don't remember how it plays out up until that point for the most part. So this is
yeah.
the thing. Like
I remember where they go and why they go there.
I've not rewatched this show since it finished in 2009.
Me
So
either.
it's been a long
But I'm
time.
excited to do it.
Yeah, but it's nice though because it's like memory has faded. So I remember how much I liked it, and I remember the broad strokes and stuff like that. It's actually kind of nice. Like it feels very fresh in a way that, and I'll be very curious to see how it holds up versus some other things that I have seen since then, because I have seen a lot more space shows and sci-fi shows since then. The most direct comparison that I think would probably come up, it would be The Expanse. Not because the premise or the plots of either shows are remotely similar, but just because this was the gritty, a little bit more grounded for its time space show. And then The Expanse took that and then went like even further with the grounded. Everything's based in science and like, you know, it's just kind of nuts. And obviously The Expanse is a more modern show with
Yeah.
even for now has fantastic effects. Like that was above and beyond like what most TV shows were doing.
Yeah, I will say though the main difference is The Expanse has the advantage of being based on a really excellent book series, so everything was fleshed
Sure.
out there before it became part of the show. So there's just a difference in the way the stories develop because of that.
Of course, and yeah, and this was based on a TV show, but it was a TV show that was cheesy and like I assume a lot of the actual story we get in this outside of the main premise wasn't actually taken from the original show. So yeah, a lot of interesting things there. But I mean, they're very different shows. Like I don't think that you can even like thematically. I don't even think they touch on the same ideas remotely. But I think it's just because they're like they were both on the Sci-Fi Channel at least to start with, and they both
Yep.
were like of a higher caliber than most Sci-Fi Channel programming, shall I say?
Absolutely. And I think The Expanse and Battlestar Galactica also both had the kind of sense of like being more grounded, more realistic. I think I remember hearing that Edward James Olmos at some point had said, like, the minute I see a guy in a rubber mask looking like an alien, I'm out of here. Like, I don't want to do that
Yeah.
show. But as just as a template, when you hear that this is science fiction, you kind of expect that maybe that's kind of Star Trekky thing. And The Expanse doesn't really do that kind of there's a little bit more certain alien stuff. We don't, but the whole point was that this was about people and Cylons, but it's a human drama that happens to be set in space.
Yeah, and obviously we're talking about robots, and a lot of the themes that end up coming up are about the sort of themes that a lot of robot science fiction ends up dealing with. About
Mhm.
what is a living being with rights and humanity? Is the flesh and blood the important part? Is it the idea of freedom of choice and so on? Like, this is all stuff that it's going to get into, and
What
uh,
does it mean to have a soul?
yeah. The most poetic way to phrase it. Yes. So I like it gets into all that stuff, and I'm excited. Obviously, it's not a perfect show, Battlestar. Even from my memory, there was definitely I remember some episodes later on that were a bit more mixed in reception. And obviously, like any show that had a big fan base and a following, by the time it finished, there was a lot of debate over whether or not the ending was good. So I will not say how I felt about it back then. We will see when we get there eventually.
We have 70 something episodes to talk about before we get there, so
Absolutely.
it'll be a bit.
Absolutely.
But I think we're off to a great start.
Yes. I mean, there was. Whenever, because most of the other reviews I do with someone else, I usually start the conversation part. This was a little bit different because it was the first one and we were just kind of establishing everything. But I usually start with just saying, what did you think of the episode? So I guess I'll just end this with, did you like part one of the miniseries?
Of course, I liked part one of the miniseries. I never would have kept watching it from the beginning if I didn't like part one of the miniseries. I do often have this sense of I want to know what happens next, even if I think it's gone down in quality a little bit. And you're right, this show absolutely had some ups and downs along the way, but overall, there was still a pretty compelling narrative and characters I cared about throughout it. So I'll be interested to see how we feel about that on rewatch.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how we feel about some of the stuff that maybe wasn't as liked at the time, knowing it's going there to begin with. Um, you know,
Perhaps.
like sometimes because sometimes you're watching a movie or something and you don't really like the direction it goes in, but if you watch it a second time and you know it's going that direction, you can kind of maybe appreciate the setup a little bit more, how it works on its own terms. Not always. Sometimes it's just a bad choice, but be curious to see how we feel about any of that going forward. But yeah, no, and this is it's kind of funny because I feel like TV's in a weird place right now, and in a lot of ways, it feels like this was like not the start of, but it was right near the start of like a more prestigious era of TV. And that's went through a few phases, and now we're at the period where, like, you know, it's streaming services and most stuff on TV. Because even The Expanse is a good example of this, actually. It started off in SyFy, got cancelled, and a streaming service had to step in and say, we'll finish it. So, you know, that if that's not indicative of what the wider, like, industry's like at a certain point, I don't know what is. So, anywho, I think that'll do it for this first Battlestar discussion. This one went quite long, but it's an 80-minute episode and it's the first one, so I'm not surprised. But we will be back with part 2 soon. You
Sounds
can,
good.
of course, let us know what you thought of this episode in the old comments. I would say, though, for the comments, you know, watch
No
spoilers.
future spoilers.
Yeah, you know,
or mark them clearly.
yeah, because I think it would be nice if people could watch these reviews and interact with them if they're watching the show for the first time. Now, obviously, like, you may argue that we've alluded to a couple of things, but I have been very careful not to allude to anything that I think is a spoiler. You know, it's just sort of general.
We definitely have, yeah.
Yeah. So that is that. You can, of course, like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. Helps out a bunch if you do. And if you want to support the channel and everything, you can do that over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and get some bonus content over there. And check out MailFuzz Movies, where all the movie podcasts live. But that is us. So thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?